Hello viewers, I am Professor Anuradha from the Department of Social Work, Sri Padmavati Mahila Vishwavidyalayam, Tirupati. Now we shall discuss the lesson on principles of casework. We all know that principles of casework form a core part of the casework practice. They guide and direct the process of casework. And in fact, they form the basis for the casework and client relationship. Principles of casework have their origin in the philosophical basis of social work with individuals and also the value base of social work. And the research and fieldwork has shaped all these principles. They are the foundation for the effective practice with individuals. So it is essential that the social workers practicing this method of casework have these core principles in their mind. They need to adhere to these core principles because they serve as a basis and guidelines for practice. So now what are our objectives? On completion of this section, you should be able to explain the importance of principles in the casework practice. And as you go through this particular lesson, you should also be able to differentiate between the basic tenets of all these principles. And at the end of this lesson, you should be in a position to explain or put forward your understanding of the skills involved in the practice of the principles of casework. Now let us start with the principles. It was Felix Bistik, that was way back in 1957. He gave us the 7 principles of casework, and these influence the casework-client relationship. Just a quick look at all these 7 principles. We have the principle of individualization, principle of purposeful expression of feelings, principle of controlled emotional involvement, principle of acceptance, principle of non-judgmental attitude, and the principle of client's right to self-determination, which is one of the key principles, and we end with principle of confidentiality. Let us now try to understand these principles one by one. Look at them in detail and also see the context of their application, especially in the Indian scenario. Starting with the first principle of individualization. By individualization, we mean recognition and understanding of each client's unique qualities, and thereby making use of different ways in which or modalities in which we can help individuals, that is, assist individuals towards better adjustment. In fact, individualization is based upon the right of human beings to be individuals, to be treated not just as human beings, but as human beings with personal difference. This is what Bistik meant and highlighted many years ago. And we all know when we are working that no two persons are alike, either in their qualities or traits. Each person is individualized by his or her heredity, environment, intellectual capacity, strengths, and limitations. Each individual experiences unique life situations right from birth and thus forms a distinctive personality. And as such, his relationships are also distinctive. And when we say they are distinctive, we mean that their thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and capacities are distinctive and they differ from each other. Another thing that we should bear in mind is that though their problems are same, their capacities to understand are different. In fact, when we say their problems are similar, we also mean that the cause of the problem and the ability to handle it differs from individual to individual. Therefore, each individual has to be treated as a human being with personal differences. We need to be very careful about this particular aspect. And when we say that they have personal differences, we mean that we have to look into the inherent worth and capacity of each individual. We need to respect that and also bear in mind of his uniqueness. And we should also be conscious about their feelings, needs, attitudes, and another important thing is the transference phenomenon. So while practicing this particular principle, what is it that we need to do? How are we supposed to be? We should manifest a very unbiased attitude. We must provide undivided attention, including our observation when we are working with these clients, and also facilitate the client to discuss his problem. So from all these, we will be in a position to understand an understanding of the human behavior. And also as students, we have studied in other chapters, in other papers as a part of your course, that as social workers, we need to have a keen understanding of human behavior, because our paper as such, our discipline as such is eclectic, and it is derived from the application of knowledge based from various sources, especially various disciplines such as psychology, sociology, psychiatry, etc. Now, let's see what do we mean by the principle of purposeful expression of feelings. What do we mean by that? We all know when we are working with individuals, in fact all of us, isn't it? We have emotions, and emotions are the crux of our personality. And when we are talking about emotions, all of us have the need to express. We also have the need to share our emotional experiences, and that's a key element when we are doing casework, because that is the foundation for an effective casework relationship. What did Pistik mean when he said purposeful expression of feelings? He said, when we are talking about purposeful expression of feelings, it is the recognition of each individual's need to express his feelings. So how do we do that? As students of social work, we have to listen purposefully. And when we say purposefully, we have to listen very intently to what the client has got to say. We should neither discourage or condemn the expression of such feelings. And in fact, sometimes we have to actively stimulate our clients so that they find it very therapeutically useful as a part of the casework process. So when we are working with individuals, in the casework process, the client is given an opportunity to express his feelings. It relieves him of his emotional pressure, and it also helps the caseworker to assess his situation and in fact assess it more accurately. This helps the caseworker to see the problem more clearly, and it helps us to work towards the resolution. And when we are using this particular principle, it helps in building a bond between the worker and the client, because there is a content of warmth, there's a lot of comfort, and there's a trust that comes between the individuals, that is the client and the caseworker. In this context, the caseworker's knowledge of human growth and development, as we saw in the principle of individualization, even that holds good here, because it aids in the study and diagnosis of the problem of the client. When we say diagnosis, what do you mean? We are aiming at getting a realistic understanding of the client's psychological needs and also see how he or she is progressing totally. What you students should do? What is it that you should bear in mind when you are trying to learn to practice this particular principle? First and foremost is you have to create a permissive environment. When we say permissive environment, we are talking about a conducive environment in which the environment would encourage the client to freely express his feelings. And another important thing is you should have a real desire to help people, and this has to be communicated to the client at the feeling level. That's a very important aspect. Another thing is, when we want to practice this principle, you should be in a relaxed frame of mind. What do we mean by relaxed frame of mind? We mean being free without any preoccupations, and when we are working with individuals, we need to be prepared well for the interviews. We need to be prepared well for conducting the sessions with our clients. Another important thing is, when we want to create that environment where our client can express his feelings, we should also be quite attentive. The quality of our attention is a key factor which facilitates the client's expression of his feelings. So how do we do that? What goes around? What are the qualities that we look for? So the caseworker's genuine interest, sincerity, understanding, asking appropriate questions at the appropriate moment, making empathic comments, and sometimes, yes, we need to nod to what the client is saying, move forward, show interest in what the client is saying. And how do we convey our interest? Through our facial expressions, through our body language, the kind of gestures that we use. And yes, active listening plays a pertinent role when we are practicing this particular principle. Another key element is we should be very clear, or we should be sensitively very aware to the pace of the client's movement. So moving along with the pace of the client is a key aspect during the interview sessions, and this helps us to work towards the goals, and it's very much essential. And yes, we need to be very realistic, not to give any unrealistic assurances. And another thing is we need to be cautious, not to interpret too early whatever our client has said, and especially expression of his feelings. These are some of the key aspects that we need to bear in our mind. Another third important principle is controlled emotional involvement. What do we mean by that? It means caseworkers' sensitivity to the client's feelings. What do we mean the term sensitivity? What does it convey? What are we looking for? When we say sensitivity, we are trying to understand the meaning of the feelings that are expressed by the client. And another thing is we need to be sensitive in terms of our appropriate responses to the client's feelings. So, when we are talking about these appropriate responses, there are again key elements that are involved. When we say sensitivity, we need to be very alert to what we observe. We have to listen carefully to whatever the client is saying. And when we say listening, we mean active listening, because clients convey a lot of things. It may be verbal, it may be non-verbal. Again, we need to be very, very cautious. We need to be very alert. And when we are trying to become human service practitioners or professionals, we do learn about human behavior. So, when we are practicing this principle, we have to be very, very keenly observant, and a bit of analytical skills also play a very important role. So, these are all the things that encompass the element of sensitivity. Following sensitivity is understanding. What do you mean by understanding? When we say understanding, it's not our understanding, but understanding from the client's perspective. And how do we get this? This only happens over a period of time. You need to develop that essential experience and understanding, because understanding and experience of human reactions and defenses takes a lot of time. So, when we are practicing this particular principle, when we are trying to put it into action, we need to understand human reactions. We need to understand the kind of defensive modes that they may adapt, and learn to make an objective assessment of his problem situation. So, we saw about sensitivity followed by understanding, and the third thing is our response. When we say response, we are talking about response at the emotional level, that is at the feeling level, because that's one of the important concerns when we are working with our individuals, rather individuals at the individual level. And when we say response, it refers to the kind of attitude and feeling that we are conveying towards our client. These are very, very important. So, when practicing this principle, just as we saw in the earlier principles, caseworkers should be very alert again to the pace of the client's presentation of this problem. Continue to convey warmth, empathy, and verbalize your responses as a professional person. Continue to be genuinely interested, be very sincere, understanding, use appropriate questions when we are trying to elicit information from our clients. And the kind of comments that we make also need to be very empathetic and show interest through your facial expressions and active listening. Imagine when a client is before us, and the kind of expressions that we convey need to be very, very, very appropriate. Otherwise, that would mar the progress of a casework situation. And listening. Listening, yes, it's not just listening to the vocal cords of the client. It's just not listening to the tone of the client, but listening to what the client is trying to convey behind his words. And at the same time, we need to be conscious about our feelings, our needs, our attitudes, and again the transference phenomenon. So these are some of the key aspects which we see roll along in all the principles. Having seen the three principles, let's now turn on to the principle of acceptance. And I'm sure all of us love to be accepted with others. We are very fond of the term acceptance. There are many a times when we feel that she or he is not accepting us and the kind of experience that an individual undergoes. So I think this holds good even to our clients. How exactly are we accepting our clients? We need to understand this particular term, acceptance. So acceptance is one of the frequently used terms in social work profession, and it has an immense value in our profession, because it's only that when we are accepting that we walk through with our clients. So this principle of acceptance acts as a guide to social work professionals. And what do we mean? Again, we need to go and look deep into it. What are we looking for? What do we say when we are saying acceptance? It refers to accepting people as they are. So when we say acceptance, we are taking people as they are. We know all people have strengths. We know people do have limitations. We know that people have potentialities. We know that people have weaknesses too. We know people are positive and people are negative. People are constructive too, and at the same time they have some elements of destruction also. And people differ in their attitudes and behavior. We need to all the while maintain a sense of client's innate dignity and personal worth. I think one should not get confused with acceptance and approval also. Acceptance does not mean approving everything what our clients do. It's not, acceptance does not mean all the good and nothing else. The objective of acceptance is not all the good, but the real. We are accepting the real attitude, the real thoughts, the real feelings of our clients. When we say acceptance, we are looking at what the client perceives, and we give him an atmosphere where he permits himself to reveal himself fully without any damage to his sense of dignity. It has an immense therapeutic value, and it is a principle which enhances the caseworker-client relationship, and the stance of the caseworker, that is when he is totally accepting towards the client, he is able to free from his defenses and he starts looking at him in a very realistic manner. And this helps in the process of dealing with the problem. So again, what do we do when we practice this particular principle? What are the key elements that we need to bear in mind? First thing is perceive and accept the client objectively as we see him. And to alongside, try and understand and acknowledge the client's pertinent reality. And it is in doing so that we are very clearly and implicitly using the principle of acceptance. And yes, we need to continue to show warmth, continue to be courteous and respectful towards the client. There should be consistent maturity and willingness also on our part to enter and share the experiences of the individual. And try to be actively listening, try to continue to observe the client. Principle more effectively. The principle of non-judgmental attitude. Non-judgmental attitude is also one of the principles. It determines the quality of relationship that we establish with the individuals. When we say non-judgmental, we should refrain from ourselves in assigning any guilt or innocence to the client. We should not assign the client's responsibility for causation of the problems or any of the needs that he or she has expressed. We try to make evaluative judgments about the kind of attitude, the standards or action of the client. Because unless we do so, we can't make it clear to our clients as to what is happening in their minds, in their thoughts, and what is the kind of actions that we have to take forward. At the same time, it's a bit tricky. When we say making evaluative judgments, it does not mean that you have an authority, so you continue to make any kind of judgments. No. To make it more simpler to all of you, when we say non-judgmental attitude, we will not say whether this is right or that is wrong. We are not trying to make a differentiation of what the clients have told us. Let us refrain from ourselves saying that what you said then was right, what you said today is wrong. No. So that's what we mean by non-judgmental attitude. Clients, when they come to us, they're in a state of conflict. And they also think that the caseworker, students who are like you all, who will don the role of a caseworker, they will be judgmental, and they also think that we are the people who will have a fixed list of what is due and what is not to be done. In other words, do's and don'ts. And as a result of this, the clients may have certain defenses. Okay, so we need to be a bit careful. They use some defenses, sometimes which may hinder the relationship in casework. So, when we are starting our sessions, we have to make it very clear to the clients, assure them that they can trust us. We are there to take them across in this particular situation. We are there to walk along with them as they talk about their problems. And I think this kind of stand on part of the caseworker, this gradually strengthens the caseworker relationship. When I say caseworker relationship, I mean again the relationship between the client and the caseworker, and this helps to develop a objective analysis of the client situation. So students, when you are practicing this principle, you continue to be respectful and attentive towards the client, continue to see the person as a unique person. So now let's move on to the principle of client's right to self-determination. What do we mean by self-determination? Simply stated, we have to recognize the need that clients have freedom in making their own choices and decisions when they are involved in the casework process. And we as social workers, and when we are practicing this principle, respect that right, recognize that need, stimulate them and help them so that they can activate their potential for self-direction. And this forms the basis for our casework practice. And when you're doing that, you continue to be clear, and because client self-determination helps in making a very clear assessment of the problem of the client. And when we are using this principle, we are able to identify what are the resources that I have, both internal and external. So this resource aspect has to be borne in mind when we are doing this. Now let's go on to the last principle, that is principle of confidentiality. This is again an ethical issue in casework process. Most often we talk to our clients, they reveal a lot of information. So what do we do about this? Do clients trust us? Do clients reveal everything? So in a professional relationship like casework, every client has the right to ask questions as to what happens with the information that I give. So it is essential that whatever the client has said is maintained confidentiality. Most of the time when the clients they talk about their problems, they release a gamut of their facts related to personal experiences related to the private life which they share. And because they are in need of a service or help, we have to make them very clear that this information is being stored properly and will be used only in professional arena, and it is shared only among professionals. Okay? So this assurance of confidentiality should be done right the moment when we start working with our clients.